We all kind of know that feeling, right? Chasing a goal, if it's weight loss, learning something new, kicking a habit, you focus on the numbers, the tangible results. But what happens when the thing you're expecting to fight, that craving, that impulse you've battled for years, just vanishes? And that's where things get really interesting, actually.
Right.
Imagine this silence that's almost, well, deafening. That's the territory we're exploring today. In this deep dive, we're unpacking that really profound, sometimes quite unsettling experience that happens when the usual noise of old habits just fades away. And it reveals these deeper, quieter truths. We're looking at the work of Dan Hollis, who guides people through this exact kind of psychological landscape after big life changes, especially around weight. He talks about something he calls the quiet window.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to unpack those unexpected emotional shifts, the identity stuff that happens when our biology changes, and also how to build what Hollis calls a supportive scaffolding to navigate these new stories we have to tell ourselves. Ultimately, we'll be sort of challenging, maybe reframing how we even think about failure, turning it away from shame and more towards, well, useful feedback.
So if you've ever had that experience where a long-standing habit, maybe a coping mechanism, starts to loosen its grip, and instead of feeling relief, you felt this weird sense of unease, maybe even asked yourself, who am I without this thing? Then yeah, this deep dive is definitely for you. This goes way beyond biology. It's about the stories we live by. Okay, let's get into it.
Let's do it. So to really understand this, our sources introduce us to someone named Kate. She's 46, a mother of three, and she was 2 months into using semaglutide, one of those newer medications known for reducing appetite, quieting that food noise by affecting hunger hormones. And Kate was getting textbook results. 7 pounds down, hardly any side effects, blood sugar looking better, on paper, perfect.
Right, sounds like a total success story so far, like exactly what you'd hope for. But then came this moment that really, it really stomped us. Kate told Dan Hollis, she said, I walked past the pantry, and for the first time in 20 years, nothing reached back.
Well,
That craving, that constant background noise, it just wasn't there. Can you imagine a rhythm you've lived with for decades just gone? How did she actually feel about that?
Well, that sudden absence, as our sources describe it, it wasn't freeing initially. It was profoundly unsettling for her. She actually described feeling like a ghost in her own kitchen. Yeah. The house felt too quiet. Her brain, she said, felt like a library after hours. It wasn't relief she felt, but this really strange, almost existential kind of disorientation. And her observation was just so stark. It's not that I'm saying, it's just that everything feels like truth now.
Everything feels like truth now. That is, yeah, that's powerful. Almost chilling. So what is this unsettling quiet? This is what Dan Hollis has a specific name for, right?
Exactly. He calls it the quiet window.
Yeah.
He says it's that pivotal moment where the food stops answering your questions and the real ones start talking.
The real questions.
Yeah. For someone who's maybe used food to cope or just lived with constant cravings, that sudden silence isn't just empty. It's this unfamiliar presence, the old coping mechanism, the structure it provided, even if it was unhealthy, it's just gone,
Yeah.
leaving this huge open space.
Which brings us to something really crucial and maybe not talked about enough in these transformations, the emotional fallout. It sounds like Kate wasn't just losing a craving. She was losing something, well, more fundamental than that.
Precisely. Dan Hollis points this out really clearly. He talks about the grief of losing the thing that numbed you.
Grief, yeah.
Kate didn't necessarily miss the food itself. Our sources say she missed the signal, the rhythm, even the self-story that said, at least I know how to feel full.
Ah, okay. The familiarity.
Exactly. It's a profound loss of a constant, even if it wasn't a healthy constant. It disrupts a really deep-seated narrative about yourself. It's not just about not wanting cake anymore. It's this raw, disorienting feeling of losing something that managed or maybe masked deeper feelings for years.
That makes total sense. You'd grieve that loss even knowing it was maybe unhealthy. But is there a risk then? If you lose that specific signal, that rhythm, could people sort of unconsciously start looking for a new way to numb things if they don't deal with the truth underneath? It feels like that quiet window could become kind of a dangerous void if you're not careful.
That's a really sharp question, and yes, absolutely. The risk is definitely there. And it's important to remember this isn't just about food or weight. It applies to, well, any habit, right? Scrolling your phone for hours, maybe shopping too much, even just being constantly busy. Anything used to muffle those deeper questions.
Right.
So what happens when your familiar comfort, your distraction, suddenly goes quiet? When the thing you leaned on isn't there, it forces you face to face with whatever was underneath all along. And yeah, without being intentional about it, a new, maybe equally unhelpful pattern can definitely slip in to fill that space.
Okay, so if the biology, like the medication, helps you get to the quiet window, what actually helps you stay there? Or rather navigate what comes up in that quiet? This is where Dan Hollis really zeroes in on the power of our own story, our narrative, isn't it? It's not just about the scale anymore.
Exactly. And this leads right into Dan Hollis's core idea, which is, I think, so powerful and applies way beyond just weight management. Weight loss is biology. Staying there is narrative.
Biology versus narrative.
Okay. Yeah. He really emphasizes that the deeper work, the true transformation, the work of actually building a life where these changes stick, that all begins after the physical stuff happens. You might clear the biological hurdle, but the psychological mountain, that's still right there in front of you.
So the biology opens the door, but the real work is transforming how you see yourself, who you are in your own mind. Is that what he means by narrative?
That's
Because that brings up this term you mentioned earlier, identity grief.
yeah.
It sounds heavy.
It can be, yeah. Identity grief is that really unsettling feeling, like looking in the mirror and genuinely not recognizing the person looking back. Or maybe, your clothes fit, but your story doesn't. For maybe decades, your relationship with food or whatever the habit was might have been totally central to your routines, your social life, even how you comforted yourself.
Right, part of your identity.
Totally. So when that shifts dramatically, it's not just a gap. It can feel like a real internal earthquake. And that's the stuff you definitely don't see in the typical before and after pictures, right? This is the quiet, internal, complex part of change.
That's a really key distinction. So if the immediate craving fades, does the underlying feeling of hunger just go away completely? Or does it morph into something else? I mean, we still need energy.
Good point. It doesn't just vanish. Dan Hollis explains that hunger doesn't simply disappear, it shapeshifts.
Shapeshifts, how so?
Well, it can become memory, like a phantom limb almost, aching for the old routines. Or it can become confusion, like what does my body actually need now? What are these signals? Or it can just become space, that profound void, that quiet window we talked about.
Yep.
And this really highlights the psychological complexity when a biological drive gets dialed down. Hollis says something really striking. People don't relapse into hunger. They relapse into confusion.
Confusion, not hunger. That's interesting.
Right, because if that new space left by the faded cravings isn't consciously filled with something emotionally nourishing, then the old patterns can easily creep back in. The brain just looks for what's familiar.
So when the cravings stop, as Dan says, the truth begins. This silence, yeah, it's unsettling at first, but it's also precisely where the growth happens, where you can gain deeper self-understanding. It's like an invitation, maybe, not just a void. But how do we actually navigate that invitation?
Yeah.
How do we fill that space constructively?
And that's where Dan Hollis offers something he calls scaffolding. Not just pep talks, not more restriction.
Scaffolding, like for building something new.
Exactly. It's about recognition over restriction. Recognizing the emotional triggers, the needs that food or the old habit used to meet. And then, critically, building new rituals, new supports for the self that's emerging. Semaglutide or whatever caused the shift, it provides that vital pause. It reduces the noise, it clears the runway so you can finally see what's trying to land.
Ah, I like that metaphor. Clears the runway.
Yeah. But the medication itself doesn't solve the emotional hunger, right? It just creates this space to finally address it, to sit with those truths that are coming up.
You mentioned neurobiological scaffolding earlier versus just support. Can you unpack that a bit more? What makes Hollis's scaffolding different, more fundamental maybe, than just having supportive friends?
Yeah, that's a great question. When Dan talks about neurobiological scaffolding, he's pointing to something really structural, not just like emotional cheerleading. It's about literally helping to rewire your brain's pathways.
Okay, rewiring. How?
Genuine scaffolding involves creating new neural connections, building new habits, finding new ways to respond to stress or boredom or sadness that don't involve automatically reaching for the old thing. So this means having actual structures in place, like consistent practices, maybe mindfulness, maybe journaling, having accountability partners or professional guidance, or even just simple, repeatable new rituals, like deciding when I feel X instead of doing Y, I will do Z, like take a mindful walk instead of opening the fridge.
Right, concrete actions.
Exactly. It provides the necessary framework for your brain to build and really solidify these new narratives, to manage those buried stories and emotions that inevitably surface in that new quiet space. He argues it's not a nice to have. It's a neurobiological necessity for the change to actually last.
And this definitely isn't a quick fix, is it? It sounds like a continuous journey, an ongoing process. Does Kate's story show that?
It really does beautifully. For Kate, there wasn't some, sudden aha moment or grand epiphany. Instead, what the sources show are these consistent, small, deliberate actions. That's the scaffolding in practice. Like, she didn't snack through her sadness. She noticed the sadness, found a different way to be with it.
Okay.
She drank tea instead of opening a second bottle of wine, a conscious choice, building a new, healthier ritual. And she took a walk that she described as feeling like a conversation with her future self, actively participating in building that new narrative.
I love that, a conversation with her future self.
Yeah. It just reminds us that this journey keeps going. It's about continuously building, not hitting some magical finish line.
Okay, that brings us to another really powerful idea from Dan Hollis, how we look at failure. Because, let's be honest, in weight loss stories, or really any big effort, stumbling often gets slapped with these heavy labels, right? Weak, undisciplined, broken.
Yep.
But Hollis offers a totally different way to see it, doesn't he?
He really does. He argues failure isn't the end, it's a message.
A message.
A moment of feedback. And sometimes, he says, it's the most honest conversation you'll ever have with yourself.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge shift.
It totally reframes it. Failure isn't proof you're flawed, it's just data. It's information, an opportunity to learn and adjust course. It's about looking at what happened with curiosity, not judgment. Asking, okay, what did this situation reveal? What can I learn here?
The most honest conversation. I like that. It kind of strips away the ego and gets right to what's really going on. And this applies to relapse too, right? Because relapse often feels like the ultimate failure for so many people.
Oh, absolutely. Dan Hollis says relapse isn't a betrayal of progress. That's not what's happening. Instead, he sees it as the brain asking for the old familiar rhythm.
Ah, the brain seeking familiarity again.
Exactly. And if you ignore that signal, if you just beat yourself up instead of getting curious about why the brain is asking for that old rhythm, you don't just stumble. You risk what he calls a deeper fracture, like a breakdown in trust with yourself. And you just end up reinforcing the old negative story about being a failure.
Right.
So it's really a call to understand the underlying need that triggered the relapse, not just condemn the action itself.
That's incredibly helpful, I think. It shifts the focus from I'm weak to, okay, my system, my scaffolding needs an adjustment here. So why do people stumble after seeing initial success, especially with something powerful like semaglutide? It sounds like it's usually not the medication that's failing them.
Yeah, Dan's observation on this is really sharp. He says, most people aren't failing semaglutide. They're failing to prepare for what comes after it.
Failing to prepare for the after. Okay.
This just highlights how crucial that comprehensive post-treatment planning is. The psychological work, the emotional work, it has to continue long after the biology starts changing. The medication might give you a head start, that crucial pause, but the lasting change, that requires actively engaging with the narrative, building that scaffolding. It's kind of like a rocket booster gets you into orbit, right? But you still need a flight plan and navigation skills to actually travel through space.
That's a great analogy. So what about those moments when we do hit a snag? When the scaffolding feels a bit wobbly? It reminds me, like when you're trying to build IKEA furniture, the first time a piece doesn't fit, it's not like you throw the whole thing out. It's just feedback, right? The manual's telling you, oops, left leg on the right side. You look at it, figure it out, hopefully without too much swearing. Dan Hollis takes that same idea, but applies it much more deeply, doesn't he?
He really does. He says breakdowns in progress, they aren't usually a sign that the person is weak. They're often a signal that the support system needs reinforcing.
The system, not the person.
No, exactly. It's about figuring out which part of the scaffolding needs strengthening, which tool is missing from the toolbox, which story needs updating. He really encourages us to see setbacks as potentially sacred, he says, if you're willing to look at them with curiosity instead of judgment.
Sacred setbacks. I like that.
Yeah, it invites this really profound shift in perspective. And he reminds us very powerfully, the shame isn't in failing. The shame is in pretending you were supposed to be perfect.
That hits home. Perfection is such a trap.
It really is. It's impossible. And ultimately, it just paralyzes you.
So how do we build grace into this process then? For when we inevitably stumble? Because it's just so easy to fall into that self-blame spiral.
Well, Grace, in this context that Hollis describes, it's about how you respond to the stumble. It means reaching for a better tool instead of reaching for blame.
A better tool, not blame. Okay.
Yeah, it's a compassionate, proactive response. It prioritizes learning, moving forward, over just punishing yourself. And to help guide anyone through this, Dan Hollis offers this really powerful question for self-reflection. We can all ask ourselves this. What story am I telling myself about this failure? And is that story helping me become who I want to be?
That's a fantastic question.
It really allows you to fail forward, as he puts it, not just in weight loss, but in, well, any area of life. You shift the narrative from I failed to I learned something, from defeat to discovery.
This whole deep dive, it's really shown us that transformation, whether it's about weight or habits or any big life change, it goes so much deeper than just the biology, doesn't it? It's about having the courage to step into that quiet window. It's about navigating that identity grief with some real self-compassion. It's about building that vital scaffolding for support and learning how to fail forward with grace, turning those setbacks into, well, moments of profound learning. It's really a journey of self-discovery, much more than just, physical change.
Absolutely. And Dan Hollis's ultimate message, I think it just resonates so perfectly as a guide for this whole journey. This journey isn't about eating less. It's about living more.
Living more.
Yeah. It's about finding new language for your experiences, crafting new narratives for yourself, and really, in the deepest sense, kind of coming home to yourself in a richer, more authentic way.
So maybe something for you, our listener, to consider for a moment. What quiet window might you be entering or perhaps avoiding, not just with food maybe, but with any habit, any pattern that's maybe served to numb things out? When that familiar noise dials down, what deeper questions are waiting underneath? What uncomfortable truths might be surfacing? And maybe more importantly, what new story are you feeling ready or maybe just willing to start bravely building for your future self? Definitely something to ponder as you continue your own deep dive into life and the stories that shape it. We'll be here when you're ready for the next exploration.